Christopher here, and I'm back once again with another review, this time the Diamond Select Toys Ghostbusters Select Winston Zeddemore figure. This one comes in the exact same packaging style as the previous two, the Ray and Lewis, except it's got pictures of Ernie Hudson on it, Winston. And on the back, they put Ray where Winston was previously on the packaging. This is also the third one of the 12 figures to collect to get the rooftop scene, so there's still 9 more to get. It's a lot of collecting, but it should be a pretty nice display piece when it's all said and done. Much like the Ray and Lewis reviews, I'm going to also be doing a comparison with the Mattel figure and the Kenner versions, and just sort of give a little bit of a look at the history of the figures. So with that, I think I'm going to cut here, and I will be back with the rest of the review. Alright, I'm popping back briefly because this is a point of annoyance. I experienced this with the Ray figure, but it wasn't quite this bad. The twist tie that goes around the midsection and the pack is literally tied in a knot. I'm not sure quite how they managed that, but there's no way for me to untie this without probably injuring myself because of the wire running through the twist tie. So I now have to go track down a pair of wire cutters in order to get this figure out of the packaging. This is incredibly dumb. I do not know why they would do this. And if somehow Diamond Select sees this review, don't do this again. This is ridiculous. Alright, I'll be back in a minute. Alright, and we're back. Got Winston out of his packaging and played around with the joints, got them all loosened up. He had a little bit of sticking in his legs. The joints were slightly frozen, but I was able to unfreeze them, but they're still really tight. But they do work. The upper joint on this leg is actually kind of loose until you start articulating it. But at least none of the joints are frozen. I was kind of worried about that once I started kind of messing around with it. I was afraid that I wasn't going to be able to get these bottom joints on the legs working. But they're working now, so I didn't have to do any kind of tricks to get them working, so everything's good. I did have some slight issues with the hands. I didn't have anything break, but I would recommend when you first get this out of the package, and probably with the Ray as well, just to be on the safe side, pull the hands off and then try to do any of the articulation with them. And before you put any of the alternate hands in, you're going to want to move them around and free up the joints before you put them in. Let me see if I can find it real quick. Let's see. One of the hands, which escapes me at the moment, the one that came in the figure when I first took him out of the package, when I went to articulate it, it stressed the joint a little bit, or stressed the peg, and I can't seem to find it right now, but it's up here somewhere. I know, I'm just overlooking it, I guess. So I would recommend pulling them out of the hand and articulating them a little bit to get the pegs loosened up before you start trying to pose them. I would also recommend probably taking a knife, like an X-Acto knife or something of that nature, and scraping the inside of the peg hole just to make sure that there's no excess paint or plastic that may hinder it sliding in and out and spinning around and articulating. Um, he suffers from the same rather splotchy paint wash that the Ray figure has, and I have a feeling that's going to probably be a consistent thing. Um, Once again, the thrower will not hook properly onto the pack here. It will slightly, but the slightest movement will pop it right off the pack. I'm going to have to take some hot water and see if I can straighten out the hose a little bit so that it hangs instead of, you know, well, actually, it may have a wire in it. I think it does, because that's holding its shape. Okay, so apparently the leg hose has a wire in it, and that would be why it's not done in a clear plastic, which will allow you to kind of move it out of the way and articulate it around as you need it. So that's handy to know. Wish I'd known that before. The paint apps on the hairline are very similar in problem to the Ray figure, where they seem to have just like masked off a square. He doesn't quite have the Vulcan ears going on, but it's not too far from it. But it's slightly better than the Ray figure was. The layout of the gear is a little bit different than the Ray figure. The Ray figure has the let me grab him. Has his belt holster for the trap here on the back side, whereas Winston's is over on the right hand side in about the same location. He has the holster for a radio, the same as Ray does, and it slides in and out very nicely, and it's pretty secure in there. It's not going to come out, unless you grab it and pull it out. But the figure itself is pretty much the same. I think it's technically a different sculpt. I think there are some differences in the two, but more or less they're very similar sculpts to each other. It's not that different from how Mattel used their figures' bodies over and over and over again. As I mentioned in the Ray review, the Zeddemore name tag, if I can kind of get in on it a little bit, it's not quite on there properly. They kind of missed the mark. It'd be nice if they'd, made sure that was on properly, but that's not that big of a deal. I mean, it's on there, and it's legible, so it's really about all you can ask for. I guess since the figure itself is pretty much the same as the Ray figure, we'll just go straight into the accessories. Now, he comes with all of the same hands as the Ray figure, but the flesh hands are obviously molded in, this, brown skin tone instead of the, peach flesh tone. One thing I did want to try once I had Winston out of the package was to see if this hand, which the Ray also comes with, which is the mostly closed fist hand, see if that would hold the ghost trap from the handle. And the ghost trap comes with Winston, which is why I had to wait for having Winston. It's a very tight fit, but it does in fact fit in the hand. I'm going to assume that's most likely what it was for, because I can't think of any other accessory he has that it would work for. So while a snug fit, it does work. Maybe if you work it in and out a few times, it might fit better. The trap is fairly well sculpted. There are a few issues, like the doors are kind of sunken in on it, and you can't see that very well on camera, but they're not level. And one door is a little bit wider than the other. That's kind of nitpicky, but it is there. A lot of the details appear to be right at a quick glance. I don't like the fact that they painted the front knobs on the trap green. They should be black, but for whatever reason they went with green. For a GB1 figure, the knob over here should be black, not silver. They got the red side rods, so they got that right. But both knobs on the front here were black, not silver and black. Would have been nice if this had been painted brass, like a brass color or even a copper color if necessary. I mentioned that when talking about the proton pack for Ray, where there were certain pieces like this rod here that should have been like a copper, brass. There's a fitting up here that should have been a brass or copper color. Should be brass, but copper would at least be close. And I didn't mention it in the Ray review, but the knob up here on the top of the crank generator or gearbox is silver, and on the actual packs that is a gray knob. Would have been a nice detail for them to have gotten correct, but I guess since they were using silver paint on the pack, it was easy to just splotch it over there. Although it's a color very similar to what they used for the pistol belt, would have been a pretty appropriate color to use. So I mean, they could have done that, but they didn't. So it is worth noting, though, if you want to customize it, that's a pretty easy change to make. The Ray head sculpt I didn't mention is a decent likeness to Dan Aykroyd. However, the likeness here to Ernie Hudson I don't quite feel is as strong. I almost kind of feel like the Mattel version is a stronger likeness. I feel it looks more like the actor than the Diamond Select version does. If I bring in the Mattel version, it's like the Mattel version's a bit more caricaturized, but I feel like it looks a bit more like Ernie Hudson. I feel like they captured the look of the actor more. But that's preference, I guess. I know some people prefer the Diamond Select Toys version to the Mattel version. I'm not one of those people, but I'm not going to fault people that are. The holster here for the trap, the trap just slides over this peg, very similar to how the Mattel holster or the Mattel hook for the Neutrino wand works, and you can coil the cable up here, and then I'll worry about coiling the cable up later, but then you can slide the pedal over it just like they had it in the movie, and you can Winston can rock it just like that. Looks pretty nice on there, and it works on the Ray holster as well. It's a little more loose than I'd like it to be. It's not a very snug fit, but it does work. I mean, I'm not going to go around like throwing the figure or anything, so I'm not going to have to worry about it being like super tight. It's not going to fall off on a display, or at least it doesn't feel like it will. But some of them might be more loose than others, but for now, like on mine at least, that one's going to work just fine. I think it'll be alright. I don't think I'm going to have to worry too much about it. And I guess we can bring the Mattel Winston in, as well as one of the Kenner Winstons, and do a sort of evolution of the figure or the character throughout the different toy lines. Personally, I kind of mentioned it slightly with the Ray figure review, but I kind of prefer the Mattel figures. They're a little bit more cartoony and stylized than the Diamond Select ones, but I kind of feel like the softer actor likenesses that we get with the Mattel versions allow our imaginations to sort of fill in, a little bit better than the Diamond Select Toys ones do. The Diamond Select Toys ones are very harsh likenesses, and so if the likeness isn't spot on, then it's going to be noticeable. And I kind of feel like that's the case with most of the likenesses so far, particularly some of the later ones like, Peter and Egon and Dana. I feel like all three of those are pretty terrible likenesses, particularly Dana. The Peter Venkman one, the main problem with that is that it looks more like Jason Clarke to me than it does Bill Murray. Jason Clarke was the actor who played John Connor in the Terminator Genesis movie, and I feel like it resembles him more than it does Bill Murray. And they're fairly similar looking men, so it's pretty easy to cross that boundary between the two, and I feel like they crossed it in the favor of Jason Clarke instead of Bill Murray, and I'd have probably gone back to the drawing board were it me. Like all the other Select versions, so far at least, Winston comes with a piece of the rooftop diorama. This is the altar where Vince and Zool do the hanky-panky to open the doorway to allow Gozer into the mortal realm. And previously, Mattel did a version of this altar with their Zool figure. And they're very similar sculpts. Not a huge amount of difference between them. But the texture, I feel, on the Diamond Select Toys version's better. It also comes with the base here that it plugs into, which is another huge chunk of the display, the diorama, and it's actually fairly hefty. I'm kind of starting to notice that there are what appear to be screw posts in the diorama pieces, and I'm wondering if when all's said and done, if it's not going to screw together. I'm willing to bet those are probably just like peg posts to peg the different pieces together, but it is interesting to note that they resemble like screw holes that you'll see on the inside of a lot of hollow shell toys. So that's something to keep in mind. We may see screws included with the final pieces to start assembling it all together. But overall, I actually really like the Winston figure. He suffers from some of the same problems that the Ray figure does. The paint applications are a little bit sloppy in parts. Some of the sculpts could be a little bit better. But they're not terrible figures, and I think coupled with the display stand pieces that they're going to all come with, I think they're definitely worth picking up. I'm going to do another video here in a little bit. I'm going to show these next to I'm going to show the Diamond Select Toys figures next to the NECA figures, which should be approximately the same scale. I think they might be slightly out of scale, particularly the Terror Dogs, but they should be fairly close. I think the terror dogs look a little bit small, but that could just be me. We never really got much of a true sense of their size when compared to the other actors. So that I don't know, but they Vince looked really big he leapt out of that when he leapt out of Lewis's apartment. So I'm inclined to think that they should be fairly large dogs, and they're not small, but they seem to be a little bit less, in size than I feel like they should be. But I'll show you guys that when I get to the review, or not the review, but the overview of those. I want to kind of keep this a little bit shorter since the review went a little long. So I will be back, and I'll see you guys next time.